see you guys in the dark.
When I was in 5th to 6th grade, I lived in a small town in a very tiny town with just my mom. We had a family living next to us whose house and yard were trashy. I mean broken down cars and piles of garbage. Weeds taller than your knees. Dogs chained up everywhere. House was falling apart. You get the picture. The household consisted of a middle-aged woman who looked pretty average, besides the fact that she always looked tired and run down. A middle-aged man who had long matted hair, a scarred face, wore dirty and disheveled clothing, and walked with a cane. A young, well-dressed man, clean-cut, who was in his late teens or early 20s. They always had tons of visitors, mostly the run-down, dirty, disheveled kind, visiting their house at all hours. At that age, I didn't think much of it, but now I guess they probably had some involvement with drugs. My house was just a tiny little place that was a bit old. My mom was working on fixing it up, and at the time, our back door didn't lock. It didn't strike me as a problem since this town was so small, and no one really locked their doors. I always came home after school by myself. My mom was a single mother, and I didn't have any siblings. I'd been coming home by myself for a year before we moved into this house, so it was nothing new to me. My mom asked me to call when I got home from school, do homework and chores, and not go out until she came home. Easy enough. I was a good kid who followed all the rules. So after living there a few months, and things being just fine, one day someone knocked at the back door when I was home alone, assuming it was just a family member, because no one else ever came over. I went to answer the door. That's when I saw that it was the dirty, disheveled, creepy man from next door. I stopped and turned to walk back to my bedroom without answering the door, because I was not supposed to answer it when I was home alone, unless it was someone in my family. Well, he saw me, knocked twice as hard, a frantic kind of pounding. He went on like that for a few minutes, and while I was on the phone telling my mom about it, he stopped. About half an hour later, he started up again. I didn't even get up to look. I hid in my closet and called my mom yet again. She called my grandfather to come over from his house down the road and find out what was going on, but by the time he got to my house, the neighbor had left again. That must have been a Friday, because my mom was home the next day when he came back in the middle of the day. Her car was at the mechanic, so it looked like she wasn't home. He started pounding on the door. I went to the door and saw that it was him. I called to my mom, and he immediately left. She was tired of this entire thing because I would not stop worrying about it, and went out the door after him to ask what he wanted. When she came back, she told me that he had found a kitten and wanted to know if I wanted it. How this didn't seem weird to her, I'll never know. I said yes, I did. She told me that the next time he came over to accept the kitten and not worry about it anymore. She had a habit of claiming that I was overreacting to basically everything, despite being an otherwise amazing mom. So I listened to her. He came over again on a school day when I was home alone, and I answered the door and accepted the kitten. I said thanks and went to close the door, but he stuck his cane in the way so the door wouldn't close. When I looked at him shocked, he said that he noticed our lock was broken and that he would fix it for us. I told him that I'd ask my mom, and he left. Being a kid, I forgot to mention it to her. He came back a few days later when I was again home from school alone, knocked, and when I didn't come to the door, he just came in the house. I recognized the limping thud of his walk, and I hid myself in the closet in my bedroom because by this point, I had been getting a scary vibe from him for a while, and despite my mother telling me everything was fine, I was plain scared of this man. He thumped around a bit, never calling out to see if anyone was home, and apparently finding nothing, he left. It was at that point that I called my mom at work again, hysterical. She decided to fix the door because I was clearly panicked. He never came over again. I have no idea why. He just didn't. We moved again a year later, and I tried not to think about it too much, though I would occasionally see him walking around town. Apparently at some point while I was in college, they cleaned up their yard. He got a haircut, and they somehow managed to become a foster parent. Not long after I saw a picture of him in the local newspaper on Facebook. He He was being charged with sexual abuse of both of his foster children, child pornography, drugs, and weapon charges. All kinds of bad stuff. Apparently, the younger man who lived with him was being charged as well, and later his wife was charged with check fraud. I showed it to my then husband, who also grew up in that small town, and he told me a story of his father once catching the man looking into his little sister's bedroom window. His dad apparently threatened him if he was ever caught on their property again. So, to the pedo neighbor from my childhood, let's not meet again, please. We were on a family holiday abroad years ago, I think. I was probably about 14 at the time. My sisters were 16 at the time, and the toddler was our cousin. She was about maybe 2 years old, maybe a little bit older. So we headed out during the evening to have dinner, and just after that, we'll walk through the towns, maybe shop at a few bars for drinks. As we were walking through this town, a man who I say was badly dressed as a clown approached my sister. Bear in mind, my sister is afraid of clowns, no matter how good or badly dressed they are. She was carrying our cousin on her hip, and the clown looked at our cousin and said hello to her, making her laugh as clowns do. My sister, on the other hand, just froze. I was standing by watching this happen, kind of laughing at the fact my sister was crapping herself. And the next thing, without asking or anything, he takes my cousin from my sister. And then, of course, I thought, whoa, yo. I shouted over to my parents and my aunt and uncle. My dad comes over and says, "Hey, what do you think that you're doing with my niece?" as he was trying to get her back out of his arms. But when he tried to get her, the clown would just turn away or push my dad back. The clown says, "I thought that you would like to take a photo. Do you not want to take a photo?" My aunt comes over, but scared out of her mind, thinking that clown's trying to kidnap her daughter. We all just gather around the clown, trying to pry my cousin from his clown arms, but every time he just kept pulling away or pushing us back. Then next thing my dad had enough, he approached the clown and said, "Let go of my niece right now," grabbing him by the neck. In the end, he put her down, and my dad picks her up and hands her to my sister-in-law. Then the guy just casually says, "Oh, okay, too bad you don't want to take a photo," and hands my cousin a lollipop. We just headed back to the hotel, kind of thought nothing of it, but the next day we saw him again, as we were at a restaurant this time. He ended up taking someone else's kids away, like he did from my parents, into some room my dad spotted him. As he came out the toilets, and then stopped him, thinking that he grabbed my cousin again, but it was just someone else. But he headed back to the table, ate his dinner, but then for a second, he felt something wasn't right. So he went back down to the clown's room. I didn't know what went down when he went back, but he came out holding this other kid's hand and asked her where her parents were, assuming they were in the same restaurant. But nope, they weren't. They were at some other place. My dad took the kid back to her parents and said, "Don't let that clown anywhere near your kids again," and told them what he tried to do with my cousin. I kind of freaked out, thinking this clown was probably a pedophile. I've had a severe case of agoraphobia since I was 6 years old. I'm 19 now, female. It was 2005, maybe 2006 at the time. In the country I lived in, there were no psychiatrists for kids, only regular doctors, but they weren't helpful anyways. Nobody knew what was wrong with me until about 2012, when I was diagnosed. So me, my parents, and the rest of the family were desperate and felt helpless. Then someone my parents knew informed us to go see a hypnotherapist in the few towns away from ours. We went. Don't ask me how I managed to keep my panic attacks at bay during the trip. I really didn't. I met the man. He was in his late 60s, early 70s. Seemed pretty nice. Understood me. Didn't think that I was a nut job anyways. I saw salvation in him and kind of looked at him as my grandparent. There were some red flags, of course. But as a 6-year-old child, I've missed them all. My mother was always afraid of him because he insisted on doing the therapy alone with me in another room while she waited. First few therapies were okay. Not very helpful, but okay. That is until one day I asked him already lying on his couch to go to the toilet, to which he replied, Do you need a pee or poop? Sure, it was a weird question, but I thought he had asked it to know how long it will be in the toilet. Boy, was I wrong. I answered that I needed to pee, and he put his fingers down by my lady parts. This got me so confused. I still, of course, had no idea about sex, but still felt weird. I didn't tell my parents. I cried a lot, but thought that I needed to suck it up because I will no longer be afraid and have panic attacks and such. Since then, he didn't do it anymore. Thank God. He called my parents on a regular basis when we came home, asking them to let me go on a vacation with him, which of course they politely declined. A few years after, he is arrested for child pornography and have raped a few boys. It all clicked in my head, and I told my parents everything. We went to the police, gave statements, and that was it. He died in prison, natural causes, of course. Even though you're dead, I hope that we will never meet in the afterlife, or whatever is up there. For reference, this is an open letter. I'd like to scream this all to the world, but you look so content and normal in all your recent pictures, and you probably wouldn't remember me. You dated my older sister some years ago. She was 19 and had just entered the world of online dating. Her type was always the same, older men who seemed loyal and clever to her, and boring and emotionally stunted to me. I was right about most of them. I was 15, and as inexperienced as a 15-year-old could possibly be, I hadn't had my first kiss or first date, or even my first invitation to dance. I didn't know what my sexuality was. My sister was always much more certain about those things. She knew what she wanted and went after it, but cautiously. So after your first couple of dates together, she asked me to friend you on Facebook and decide whether I approved. I had read enough about psychology for people to trust my judgment. You were 30 and your daughter was 6. I remember thinking about how much closer I was to her age than yours. My sister bought her a tiara on her birthday. You had a house and an IT job and a Facebook full of pictures of your cheerleader-type ex-girlfriend. My sister was insecure about all of those. I used to want to be a profiler. You were the best profile I've ever talked to. You knew my deepest insecurities about hardly a day of conversation. You could guess things that I've never said to anyone. You knew exactly what to say to keep me engaged despite what I was feeling. I was predictable back then, I suppose. You took my thoughts seriously, and it was amazing. We had such incredible discussions about the origins of life. Maybe this is why I figured you thought we were on the same mental level. But you were immature sometimes. There were ASCII dicks, of course. You asked my phone number like I would be granting an unimaginable honor by sharing it. It worked. You then sent me a picture of a pepperoni pizza. I didn't open it for hours because you alluded to sending something else, and then expected my gratitude for not sending something naughty. You said that your desires would send you to hell, though they were only thoughts, for now. I can still picture the moment that you sent that message. I was sitting on the kitchen counter, swinging my legs, and waiting for my phone to charge so that I could take it off the wall. It was after dinner, around 8 p.m. on a February weekend. I believe I had white jeans on. I definitely remember fuzzy blue slippers. They slipped off my feet as I ran upstairs in a panic to pray until the revulsion went away. It didn't. It took a few more things to make me finally cut you off for good. You told me what you imagined I'd be like in bed. Far from accurate, if you care. You asked for a cute picture with my stomach showing. At the time, I had no idea why I was so uncomfortable. It wasn't explicitly sexual, and of course, it wouldn't go that way, I thought. It took me years to realize I wasn't overreacting from inexperience. Thank you for the doubt. Go fuck yourself, and don't think of me during it. My sister's relationship with you never got serious enough to tell the rest of our family about. A couple months later, she broke up with you. She said you were beginning to creep her out. I agreed without elaboration. I'm sure you don't remember each other anymore. You probably don't remember me either. Thank goodness. You wouldn't like what I've grown into. You might have to wish I didn't remember you. So for your sake, I don't want to see you again. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.